Okay, my wonderful friends, this is going to be a pretty interesting discussion, and what we're going to talk about now is health and nutrition and how do you become healthy, and why was there such a spike in the problems in health back in the early 60s, 70s. It actually goes back to the 20s and well, 30s actually and up. But this is the Cato Institute. And they came up, this is called a Big Fat Nutrition Policy, Nina Teskelos. Now, she is the writer of a book that talks about that we should have cholesterol in our diet, more cholesterol. And the cholesterol is not what's leading to obesity. Now, let's start to look at what she's saying. And I am going to incorporate into this something that happened to me years ago. And as a matter of fact, this article was sent to me by my friend Roger Dunnigan, who is he came up here to do a video, a documentary on my research years ago, when it was not accepted by anyone. And he came up with a video guy, and we spent some time together, and they examined everything, did a bunch of video and so forth, and we had quite a bit of time to talk, and he related to me the story of how he had gotten Lyme disease, and it took over his whole body. And they kept giving him antibiotics to kill the Lyme disease. And before long, he was in a crisis mode where his body had just basically shut down. They told him to prepare for the end because there was nothing they could do for him. They had done everything they could, and he was going to die. And he said he started taking these probiotics. And I will mention the brand later, but I'm not promoting any brand or anything, but this was a specific brand, he told me. And he said he was better within a week or two. I mean, better. And so of course, the way my mind works, because I had colorectal surgery twice just prior to that. And when he started talking about his conditions, and I was starting to relate them to mine, and I realized there's something going wrong with these antibiotics, because I had just before I had my issues, I was taking antibiotics for a root canal, and he just gave them to me. He said, "Yeah, just take these, make sure you don't get infected, and everything will be fine." I said, "Okay, good." And then about 6 months later, I was having really serious issues. I don't even know if it was 6 months later, but it wasn't long after. And so when I put together what Roger told me and what happened to me and the antibiotics and the takeover of the body, literally, because you don't have any defenses. So I really started doing a lot of research on this. And this has been known for literally forever. All right, this is not unknown knowledge. This goes back to 2011, and the National Institute of Health just dropped the ball for 10 years. Probiotic genomic and studies have identified several genes and specific compounds derived from probiotics, which mediate immunoregulatory effects. Studies regarding the biological consequences of probiotics in host immunity suggest that they regulate the function of systemic and mucosal immune cells. Mucus is what creates the barrier between you and the rest of the invaders. And intestinal epithelial cells, which are the lining of your intestines to keep protection. Thus, probiotics showed their therapeutic potential for disease, including several immune response-related diseases. It helped in all these things: allergy, eczema, viral infections, and potentiating means increasing the vaccination responses. Not a single word about that 10 years ago. And here it is again, just a few months ago, same story. Let's just look up what it says about this. And we'll just jump to the conclusions, because this has to be understood before we can get anywhere. If you don't take the probiotics, you're never going to be better. I don't care what they give you, because you're going to be a host for disease forever, because your probiotics are not protecting you with the mucus and the serosa, and these epithelial cells are not being maintained to a degree that they prevent invasion. And here it is, probiotics in prevention and treatment of COVID-19. Just came out a few months ago, still not a word about it. And here's the conclusion. It's very interesting to read, but here's the conclusion. And it supports the role of probiotics in regulating the immune system, exactly what they said before. But in addition to that, probiotic supplementation could reduce the severity of COVID-19 morbidity and mortality. Probiotics can inhibit cytokine storm by simultaneously boosting the innate immune system and evading the exaggerated amount of time it takes to adapt for immunity, which is a challenge to respond quickly to the viral onslaught, because we've never seen this disease before. Probiotics induce suppression, so the probiotics induce suppression of the inflammatory cytokine response, may prevent both the severity and the occurrence of acute respiratory distress syndrome, which everybody's dying from, making probiotics an attractive add-on, adjunct. And it goes on, I haven't had not a word spoken about this by our health department or by media in general. And that sounds pretty important to me to look into this. And I understand it now very well, what these probiotics do and how they create the health in your system, because they literally are the chemists that create the products that your body needs to survive. And once you kill the good bacteria that in you are doing all these things, creating all these products, you're done. You cannot maintain the mucus, you cannot maintain the molecules that come out to fight the invaders, because there's not only mucus slime, there's what they call serosa, which is a toxic mix that shoots out and attacks invaders that might be gnawing at you, whatever. And if you don't have those layers of bacteria in your body and they bind, it's called membrane-bound bacteria. And membranes separate all the bad stuff from the good stuff. So if that membrane is not bound with the bacteria, you cannot produce the serosa, you cannot produce the mucus, you are a target for invasion. So whether you're to get vaccinated or not, once you're out of that mode, if you don't treat your bacteria, you're still in a place where you can be invaded easily. That is the defensive system in the body, is bacteria. It literally is. All right, widespread antibiotics use was coming in the 60s, 70s, 80s. By the 80s, they were just squirting it into everybody. The kid come up with an ear infection, they just give them antibiotics. You have antibiotics for virtually everything. And that's what I believe caused this spike. And it just continued on and on and on. Now, here's what she has to say. Let's listen to her statements, and then I'll make my statements about her statements.
Or not too aggressive, and then something happens to get tick sharply upwards. In fact, if you go back and look at pictures in the 1970s, go look at the line.
No, she's going to be talking about obesity. And that's the same thing. If you're not getting the nutrition extracted efficiently, your body will just say, just keep doing it, just keep eating, taking everything you can take in. Sooner or later, maybe you're going to find the stuff we need. And then you just get fatter and fatter and fatter. And that's what she's talking about now, is obesity. Because that's just another part of the same puzzle.
Line of kids waiting to watch the latest Star Wars movie that's come out. Like, they're all thin. Not one fat kid among them. And then, now we live in a much different world. What happened in 1980? Well, I want to tell you a story. The story I tell in my book, in a very abbreviated way, of just how do we come to believe what we believe about fat and saturated fat and cholesterol. So it all starts in the 1950s. You can see that chart. That's on your right. That is the rising tide, the sharply rising tide of heart disease in America.
All right. Heart disease. What is heart disease? First of all, what is it that causes heart disease? We have to look into that. But it's going to be something that is allowing the heart to be attacked. The membrane is not sufficiently intact. And your heart is one of these things that does this all day long, a bazillion times a day. or you're dead. So that membrane has to be extremely elegantly constructed. And if it's missing any of its elements, magnesium or zinc or cobalt or any of the basic little bits and pieces, it doesn't have enough of them, it's going to weaken, and then you're going to have invasion, or you're going to have, it just can't keep up with the pulsation and all that stuff. And this is about the time, 1928, say it was about here, is when they started coming in with the penicillin. And before that, they were doing sort of, who knows what they were doing. But at that time, started out. Penicillin, does it cause this? I don't know. But I can tell you what, heart disease, as with all other diseases, is basically due to some membrane invasion. That's my take on it now, after doing this research. Now, she's going to continue on. And she's talking about increasing the amount of cholesterol in your body. And that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. But your body will find that cholesterol. Of course, you have to have sources for it, naturally. But your bacteria will dig that cholesterol out just to put just what you need. It won't do excess. It won't do too much. It won't do too little, as long as you have what it needs to produce the products it needs. Now, if we cut back on the diet and cholesterol, yes, then you're going to have some issues because you don't have enough raw materials. Anyway, I'm going to let her talk.
America, which was terrifying. President Eisenhower himself has a heart attack in 1955, is out of the Oval Office for 10 days. That is a huge and terrifying event for everybody. And just imagine, men are dying in the prime of their life, right and left, and this had not happened to their fathers. This was something entirely new. And it was really important that people try to understand, why is this happening?
Now, I would assume that older people were getting more antibiotics because they would come in with more symptoms and more aches and pains or whatever. And they would just give them antibiotics for little infections, skin infections and so forth. So that's my take on why all of a sudden they were getting a huge rise. And the older people are going to be more susceptible to having little issues come up. And when they give them the antibiotics, they're the ones that are very easily destroyed, because the older you get, the more you need your gut to perform these things flawlessly. Otherwise, you will be sick.
Well, there were a number of ideas about it. Maybe it was vitamin deficiency, maybe it was auto-exhaust, maybe it was that famous type A personality, you yell all the time and then you just keel over with a heart attack. These were all viable hypotheses. But there was one hypothesis proposed by this man, Ansel Keys, a pathologist at the University of Minnesota, and what he came up with what was called his diet heart hypothesis. And his idea was that you would eat saturated fat and cholesterol in your diet, so as meat, cheese, dairy, and this would lead to your having elevated cholesterol in your blood, serum cholesterol. This would clog your arteries like hot oil down a cold stovepipe, and would give you a heart attack. That was his hypothesis. And it turns out that he was just a very kind of outsized personality. He was very aggressive. I mean, he was called arrogant and a bully even by his friends, and was said that he could argue anyone to the death. He was fiercely a believer in his hypothesis, and he was able to get himself into the nutrition committee of the American Heart Association, which you see here. That was at the time really the only public health group that was dealing with heart disease, and everybody was following their advice. In 1960, they came up with a paper saying, we really would like to tell the American public what to do to avoid heart disease, but there's no data. Ansel Keys gets on the nutrition committee, and 1 year later, with no greater data in hand, he's able to get this recommendation published, which says you need to restrict your saturated fat and cholesterol in order to prevent heart disease. And this is the first advice anywhere in the world telling people to cut back on saturated fat and cholesterol. This is what I sort of think of like the little acorn that grew into the giant oak tree of advice that we have today. This is where this idea first became institutionalized.
No, I'd just like to say something. there is a process that they use to decide whether or not to recommend something or even speak about something. And I can show with some very, very simple random controlled trials if probiotics work or not. That's all I'm asking. And the National Institute of Health says yes, they do. And they have said that they actually help with COVID-19. Now, we have people dying daily, just overflow, unbelievable, not a single word being spoken about that. And we could do a randomly controlled trial right now. Just all they got to do is take the pills. That's all they do is take the pills. And they're not going to hurt anybody. Even the National Institute of Health said they should be given to the seriously ill and frontline workers, and it could reduce this issue. That's their words. That's not my words. So we could easily do a randomly controlled trial where we went into some of these hospitals and these people they're ready to die. Give it to them. My friend Roger, he was good. They told him to prepare for dying because you're going to die. We're sorry. There's nothing we can do for you. All right, you hear me? And this is what they're telling these people now. But they're putting them on these ventilators and just prolonging their issue and hoping that they will respond sooner or later to that attack. And they might, but it did say that it gives an enhanced reaction to vaccinations as well. And not a word's being spoken. That's what really upsets me. So I'm going to hopefully have some kind of a discussion today. We're going to have open discussion about, why are they not talking about the probiotics? I see her issues and she's thinking, oh yeah, we got to have a lot more cholesterol in the diet. Well, that's fine too. But probiotics is what makes everything usable in your body. They are the chemists. They create catalysts, which are enzymes, and they break down molecules millions of times a second. And just one breaks down millions, and it never even gets used up itself until it finishes up consuming whatever it wanted to consume to break up. That's what a catalyst does. And as far as I know, we can make some things that do catalysts work, but not like the bacteria. They know what they're doing. All right, I'm not going to drag this out too much longer, but here it is right here. See, this weight of obesity started really bad in the 80s, and it's really plateaued, and it's not getting any better, and you see it all the time, and it's because people are not digesting the food and getting what they need, so their body says, just keep bringing in whatever, eat some more stuff. Maybe you're going to get something in here that I can use, and it drives your appetite, and then it makes you consume all kinds of things, and it doesn't help. But your appetite continues to be aggressively moved forward, and you're still not getting what you need. Bacteria is not there to break the bits apart. Even though you're eating the stuff you need to eat, your bacteria can't break it apart for you to be able to use it in your body. You have to break these things down into the molecular state, and that only the bacteria can do that. Okay, once again, I'm going to leave it at this. Just go up here, look at probiotics in prevention and treatment of COVID-19. And this is the National Institute of Health. Just put that in and you'll find it instantaneously. And you go down to the conclusion, and it's very, very hard to understand why we're not hearing more about this in the medical field. Because I've tried to contact a ton of doctors. Not a single one of them listened to anything I had to say or has ever heard of this. So the research is wonderful, but for somebody to know about it would be a lot better. And again, 10 years ago, they had the same research. They're just doing the same thing over again, only this time they're talking about how it would work for COVID. So I love you all. I just hope we can get a little more perspective for our future prospects. Let me just give you this last thing. This is the link between your gut health and cholesterol, because that's what she was talking about, cholesterol. Well, guess what? These are myths and so forth, but let's just look down to what is. This is where bacteria is on the outside of your intestinal epithelium. This is where your intestine is. And these little things stick up there, and they get all the food as it passes by, and the bacteria breaks it down, and the mucus keeps the stuff away. This bacteria is really bound more in this bacterial EV area and down in here somewhere. This is the surface bacteria that is the consuming bacteria that breaks down your food. But when you get down inside, you have your immune cells and your, all kinds of different bacteria that fight back and squirt out mucus and do all that stuff. But these ones out here digest your food. If you don't have these to digest the food, you're done anyway. So, and then if you don't have the ones down in here that are bound in the membranes, you can't keep the bacteria, you can't keep the protection. And this is exactly what happens, the gut microbiome and cholesterol. Here's where you get sick, is when it slips through the gut bacteria, and they're picked up in the bloodstream. All right, now, this is when you get sick, slips through the membrane layer that says, you stay out there, let these bacteria break you all up and make you into food, and then just get the hell out of here. And if you start to try to attack us, we're going to squirt mucus out at you. And then if you really get nasty out there, we got some guys that have toxic chemistry we're going to squirt out at you. And that's how your immune system works. You kill any of these bacteria, the ones that eat, you're done. The ones that create the mucus, you're done. The ones that create the serosa, you're done. You're not done. You're in a condition where you're invadable. And that's the problem. And that's what they have to start taking more consideration into the gut microbiome and do some very serious controlled trials immediately. Because you're not going to die from taking the probiotics, and they recommend you take them. So I'm not saying to do anything that they're not recommending. I'm saying this is what the trial should be about.